You kind of mentioned AI, and I think there's this idea that this is the end of creativity for people. And I just see it as completely the opposite of that. I see it as a tool for unlocking an insane amount of creativity, and it will allow people who just don't have the technical ability to make what's in their head. Now they can do that. And I really look at it, the camera, as an analogy to it. Like, we all have cameras now. Almost everybody takes some level of pictures, I would say. But almost nobody I know is a photographer.
The content presented on this podcast does not in any way represent investment advice. The information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes. Crypto assets are considered risky investments. You should always do your own research before investing. The opinions expressed here do not represent those of CoinDesk's editorial staff.
All right, welcome to CoinDesk Spotlight. I am Sam Ewen. Very excited to have this conversation with Mike Winkelmann, also known as Beeple. Mike, first of all, how are things? My most important question, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
What did I have for breakfast? Well, I almost never eat breakfast, but I did have a shocking amount of coffee. So we're jacked up now. Yeah, thank you guys for having me here. Very much appreciate it.
Mike, on this show, we kind of talked to a bunch of the folks who have been around blockchain for a while, but also who have really led the industry in different verticals, different areas. And obviously, you're probably at the top of the heap when it comes to the NFT ecosystem. Just, quickly thinking about the ride we've been on, looking at NFTs 2025, how are you feeling about the digital art ecosystem in general?
It has, I think, ride is an appropriate term. We've seen the ups and we've seen the downs, and I think we're back on the sort of like upswing. I think it's something where I think you're starting to get to more of a place where you have to have a bit more meat on the bones when you launch a project, and it has to be something that people truly connect with, less on the speculation side than obviously 2021, where it was just like, I mean, if I'm being honest, you could launch any butt trash and it would just go absolutely ape. And so, yeah, those days are very much gone. And so I think that's good. I think it's really like people are putting more focus into projects that feel like they have some legs. And so I think that's really good. And it feels like the space is kind of like maturing a bit more. And I think NFTs have a lot of use cases. I think even outside of digital art, I think massive amount of sort of like use cases that most of which have not been sort of like realized for this technology, which is, proving ownership of a virtual object. But I think you're really seeing these things kind of like splinter in more sort of like different directions. And it seems like there's more of a sort of like art focus than in the past. I would have said it was more of a project and sort of like collectible, or sort of like, focus more. And so to me as an artist, obviously, I, sort of like and enjoy that. And so, yeah, I feel like it's something where I think it's sometimes people think there's going to be this like, giant explosion again. I personally don't think that's, going to happen. I think it's going to be a sort of like slow rise to kind of like acceptance now. And I think we still have a massive amount of room to go.
I want to go a little bit back and think about your career. I know you have a computer science degree, and I look at you as an artist. I also look at you as a creative technologist when you look at the arc of what you've done. It doesn't mean you're programming everything, but I think you've been utilizing these tool sets that really are technology driving the artwork you're able to make. And you've obviously done so many deep dives in different software packages. A lot of your early everydays were about that. I wanted to know, how did you first get into building your artwork through the medium of technology?
To me, it was something that really just naturally, I think, happened as soon as we got a computer when I was, in fourth grade, and I'm 43. That would have been probably, I don't know, 1991, somewhere around there. It was just like, this is the thing. Like, it was like, the computer was like, the thing. And so using it to make art just kind of like really happened naturally. And I think at the core of my sort of like practice, what I'm trying to do and most excited and most inspired about is trying to create things that you've never seen before aesthetically. And I think that's something where technology, because it's always evolving and always presenting new sort of like possibilities and new kind of like workflows, it naturally kind of like facilitates that more. It's rare that I see something like, and maybe it's just because I don't have a trained eye, or maybe it's just, whatever reason, like painting wise or like traditional media, where I'm like, whoa, that feels super, super new and kind of like super novel. But I see that more with digital art, where I see things where it's like, wow, I've never seen something that like looks like that. Like it's a new aesthetic.
I mean, I remember when we were kids, my brother and I, we got a Radio Shack computer and we learned how to program BASIC. And the first thing my brother programmed was like a penis, because as young boys do, right?
Yeah, and I'm still in that phase. And
Right,
that
exactly. But I mean, do you have any memory of that first moment that you were like, oh, I'm just going to make this thing, and look, I just did that?
100%. Yeah, it was the same thing. Like my dad taught me how to like program a bit in BASIC, and it was really like, oh wow, I can like make different things and experiment. And to me, I continually feel like that, and honestly, even more so lately with all the AI tools. It's like every 3 weeks, it's like, holy shit, look what I can make now. And so it's really very there's just, it's moving so fast and it's presenting all these new possibilities. To me, that's what's really sort of always fun and inspiring, is you're constantly getting a new paintbrush.
And it seems like you're constantly getting a new canvas as well.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, then, you are using all these tools over, now has been almost decades. When did you first sort of learn and sort of to play around in the blockchain, regardless of if you were thinking of NFTs? And was that sort of just another software experiment?
Yeah, it was it was really only about 4 months before that sale that I learned of NFTs. And so it was really a pretty quick ride there. It was a pretty quick ride. Things were coming real fast. But immediately I saw this medium as having an insane amount of potential. And especially, I think it has a massive amount of potential in terms of making dynamic NFTs. And my first sort of Genesis drop was a dynamic NFT. It was one that changed based on the election. And so this is something I immediately sort of like realized is like, wait a second, these things could like change and like evolve over time. And like that's a new dynamic fundamentally than sort of like traditional media. That painting behind you, like it's not going to change. It is what it is. Like that's it. It's a like completely immutable object. And I think the ability for art to be dynamic, I think, is something that's very utilized in terms of this medium, but something that I think you will see. Like I actually think in the future it will be like the default that most art will be dynamic, and very little art or less art, let's say, will be sort of like completely sort of like static. And so, yeah, I think trying to figure out ways to utilize this medium to I think kind of it's sort of like full potential, to me, is really interesting and something we've been, really kind of like focused on.
When you talk about blockchain, the medium, the dynamic nature of it, I feel like we see a lot of tokens and crypto memes making it into your work. I guess I'm wondering, do you have a take on crypto itself? Outside of the art side, do you have any thoughts of the industry? Because it can be challenging for some and polarizing for others. Uh, so like, how do you look at the blockchain and the rise of Bitcoin and kind of cryptocurrencies in general?
I think of it as being super fascinating. I think of it being, very interesting on many levels, and kind of like it's such a like big topic. I think the cryptocurrencies are obviously interesting as a, financial tool, and I think they've got, many use cases that I think we're, again, still very early in, and I think you'll see more people. I've got Ethereum and Bitcoin and Solana and blah blah blah. In terms of the like meme coins and all of the things with that, I find that to be super interesting too, because it's this mix of like sociology and technology and sort of like financialization, and art usually plays some piece of it, and sort of social media. And so it really, to me, feels quite sort of like bleeding edge in a way, in terms of that being kind of like a sort of like medium. And yes, there are shocking amounts of bad actors in the space, no shortage of that. But I think there's also a lot of people who are really kind of like approaching this in a thoughtful way and wanting to do something new and something sort of like, I don't know, more substantive and more sort of like legitimate with this technology. And so to me, I think it's very, very inspirational. And I think the fact that it is decentralized and anybody can just build things, and then everybody can weigh in on whether those things are interesting or not interesting, have value, don't have value, I think is, it keeps things really moving, and the pace of it is just insane compared to anything I've ever, kind of like experienced before.
Wish you could access cash without selling your Bitcoin? Ledn makes that possible. The global leader in Bitcoin backed lending, Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018 and never lost a single Satoshi of client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? With custodied loans, collateral is not lent out to generate interest, no credit checks, funds in less than 12 hours, no monthly payments, repay whenever you want with zero penalties. And proof of reserves reports verified by a top accounting firm are published every 6 months. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at ledn.io. That's ledn.io.
I want to go back a little bit, Mike. You started Everydays in 2007, I believe. A lot of your early social media posts were about encouraging other people to make Everydays and kind of join you in this journey. One, starting back then, did anyone take you up on that? And to this day, are there still people who are following in the kind of format you built?
Yeah, there's definitely people who are sort of like following in. And for a while in my space, it kind of became so popular, and this is pre-crypto, that it was sort of like, oh, you're doing every day. Is like everybody's doing that. It was like not cool anymore to like do every day. So many people started doing every days. And there's definitely still people from that sort of like original kind of like cohort still doing them. But yeah, there's new people. I was just saw an artist called Mendez, I think, just posted something about him doing his everyday in a cafe or something at midnight. And so yeah, I think to me it's such a great practice to just sort of like get better, and it can be applied to many different things. And without that sort of like discipline, I think my sort of like output would be far less. And so it really is something that to me is still super challenging each day to not make a complete pile of crap. And so yeah, it's we got a bit left here. We got to see it through.
And it feels like a lot of those earlier experiments were about you testing out new platforms, new systems, trying to learn software. So how much of that early work, and even to some degree today's work, as you mentioned with AI, is really also about you figuring out how to better express yourself?
Yes, I would say in the beginning that was like almost entirely the case. It was like I was learning this software. Cinema 4D was the software I was primarily learning completely from scratch using the everydays. And so it really, took a while to even have any level of proficiency to make like, anything close to what I was sort of like had in my head. Now it's still very much the case, because now there's all of these different tools through AI and different workflows that are possible in terms of using AI to make an image, and then taking that image and making it into a 3D model using AI, and then taking that 3D model and bringing it into Cinema 4D, and then taking the Cinema 4D file and upscaling it using AI. So there's sometimes I use like 3 different types of AI in the like process of making the image. And none of them is what I think people usually think of when they think of AI, in terms of just like typing in text and then getting the image. It's not that. It's like utilizing it in a more sort of like granular way where I have more control. But yeah, there's still many sort of like different just technical things to kind of like work through and experiment and play with. But I think that the images now too are really also about trying to communicate kind of like some message or some commentary or some, they're not just sort of like experimentations with the like technical tools. They're kind of a mix of both.
And I want to get into the subject matter of them in a minute, but I keep thinking about how people are utilizing AI tools, and I sort of had this thought of, if you took an AI LLM and just trained it on all of your hard drives, what would this AI say about you, right? Like, describe Beeple, and I was wondering if you have any thoughts of what the adjectives it would use.
That's an interesting thing. I mean, that's the thing. It does sort of like know about me. It just like if you just ask, ChatGPT, what do you think about Beeple? Blah blah blah. It's got some opinions, and so I think, and people have tried that, and I've tried that to some degree, but it's actually not as like, the work is a bit more all over the place than I think a lot of people kind of like recognize. Like, there's a lot of the work that's just abstract and has no message, has no wieners in it. And so if you're sort of familiar with my work just over the last couple of years, it's not, necessarily sort of like representation of the whole kind of, now 25 years that I've been making digital art. And so, yeah, it's not as kind of focused as you'd think on just being a wiener generator.
Although it sounds like we probably could make that too if we asked.
You could. You probably.
Thinking about the subject matter, because you brought that up, have there been any everydays or other work you've made that you've actually been afraid to release?
100%. I've gotten that question a few times, and people are like, do you ever like censor yourself? 100%. Like, there's definitely things where it's just like, okay, I don't know about this. This might be, because there's certain, let's say, invisible guardrails that you just don't touch. And so I'm trying to walk the line. And I'm also not trying to like offend people. I'm trying to make something that I think is funny. Like, my aim is not to be like, oh, I'm gonna fucking piss off the libs. Like, it's kind of like, that's not like, I want everybody to like it. I realize sometimes people might not like it, but that's not my like goal. But yes, I do tend to make work that kind of usually pisses off one side or the other. And it's like, it can be day to day that it's like, I'll do something that makes fun of Biden, and a bunch of people are like, this fucking mega fucker, blah blah blah. And then I'll do something that makes fun of Trump, and they'll be like, oh, this fucking libtard. And so it really, I feel like unique sort of skill at being able to piss off both sides.
So I used to teach a course on the history of propaganda and media, and one of the things, especially in during World War II, World War One, the Cold War, sort of political cartoons were one of the ways in which people actually were able to digest what was happening, and I see that in your work quite a bit. And as you mentioned, the commentary and not not taking sides while taking sides maybe for that day, if you will. But is that part of your inspiration, is like the ability to sort of digest these moments in time and give someone either something to laugh at, to be horrified by? What inspires you in that world? Is that part of the influence as well?
Yeah, it is, but I would say not really necessarily in kind of like a propaganda way, which I would consider much of contemporary art to be just like pure propaganda, where it's kind of like, okay, you seem like you have a very specific goal in mind in terms of like what you want people to think and then what you want them to do from that. And that's really not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to present different situations, sometimes, or oftentimes kind of humorous situations, and sort of, sometimes look at what could happen in the future if we kind of like play the movie out through this kind of like, thing that's going on right now, and take it to an absurd level in the future. It is kind of, sort of related to sort of like political sort of like, cartoons or sort of like commentary, but it's trying to be in a more I don't know, agnostic way, I guess, on the sort of like whole, because I think both sides have their moments, let's say. And so I'm really kind of trying to take each sort of thing on a per case basis and kind of like look at that situation isolated.
Tell me about the process of coming up with the work. We have a U.S. senator getting tackled and cuffed. We have Israel bombing Iran. We have Coinbase launching all these new initiatives. Elon making up with Trump a little bit. The National Guard in L.A. A plane crash where someone survives. Like, there's so much stuff. How do you go through and digest and say this is going to be today?
Yeah, it's tough because it's like there are a lot of things going on, and sometimes it's like, the Pope dying or something. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of, or Elon telling Trump to go fuck himself. It's kind of like, well, that was a big, like there are certain moments that kind of, rise above the sort of like noise. But sometimes it's tough to determine what is the sort of like biggest story of the day, because the way the algorithms work now is if you start kind of like going down a hole, then it sucks you down that hole of like, oh, this is what you want to see. Well, okay, here we go. And so then it can be very easy to be like, wow, everybody's talking about this thing. And it's like, no, not that many people are talking about it. It's just you showed interest in it. So the algorithm is just piling on all this crap about it. And so, yeah, and that's something I don't think people are really cognizant, and I'm probably even not even fully cognizant of the extent of that I think people are really just siloed in these kind of like, stories that once they take interest in them, then it just becomes the thing. And so, yeah, it is kind of challenging now to sort of like determine, because there's a lot of weird crap going on, and I don't know. It's just, and about all these things too. Like before, it'd be like, I remember reading some thing about like the average person in the 1800s or something, like their entire lifetime, they like, learn one newspaper worth of
Yeah.
like information. And like, that's like 5 seconds of scrolling social media now. And so it's just like, I don't even, yeah.
So there isn't a I must do this hierarchy. It's kind of what just catches your interest, and maybe are
It's
you?
each day, it's me struggling to figure out what is the idea and picture that I most want to make. And that's harder than it seems to do, because we're all human and we're all kind of innately want people to like what we do and appreciate what we do and be interested in what we do. But sort of paradoxically, if you make the work that you are most interested in, I believe that's what resonates most with most people. Even if it's something very obscure, they can innately tell that you had a lot of passion and that you went really hard on this, whatever it was. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find what is the story, what is the picture each day that I am most interested in sitting down and spending hours making, and really gonna like inspire me to try very hard.
Yeah. How do you discern the difference between Beeple the character and Mike Winkelmann the character? And is there a difference between them, or they coexist in the same time?
No, there's not really a difference. Like this isn't like some, some character that I'm playing or whatever. This is just like, you know, if my kids were sitting right here, my wife, like it would be, this is my parents, whatever. Like this is pretty much, there's only one sort of like thing. Yeah. And so the ideas and pictures that I'm making are really, again, a reflection of like deep down, what is the thing I most want to like say and sort of like create. And I think trying to tap into that is harder than it sounds, but I think the more you can do that, the more your work will resonate with others.
But I did read an article from 2018 where you described Beeple as a furry character that squeeze its belly and it makes noise, and so I did think that there was a
That
little
I
bit of
was a
that.
furry.
You may be a furry, but
No,
yeah,
I don't know if I've got one here. Yeah, here's one. This isn't me. This is just what I was like named after. And
okay.
so this like Beeple like toy thing is just like a toy from like the 80s that's like was never really that popular. And so this is what, again, in 2003 when I started releasing work as Beeple, this is what I was named after, but I'm not this toy.
But there does seem to be an interesting dichotomy, and again, I'm probably just reading into it, right? You have this upcoming piece, Diffuse Control, coming to the Shed in New York, which is a kind of cultural institution. You've been in museums all the time, and those works are somewhat agnostic to the commentary, if you will. But they're kind of these just standalone, beautiful objects in 3D. And then someone might go on your Instagram and see, Greta Thunberg's head on an octopus, or Trump with tacos as genitals. And I'm wondering if you think that there's how does that same person see the work?
I can see how you'd be like, wait, what are you doing here? Yeah, and that's the thing to me that I'm really interested in trying to be able to operate on many different sort of aesthetic and thematic and sort of like conceptual kind of like levels with the sort of like work that I'm creating. So yeah, some of it is like meant to be very sort of like crude and meant to be very like visceral or whatever, funny. And then other stuff is like the diffuse control is like not that at all. Like it's completely like, it's a work that's much more kind of like serious. There's not really anything like funny about it at all. Like it's a work that sort of utilizes AI to create these sort of like systems where curators can sort of like input images and sort of like affect the piece, but it actually doesn't really like have any kind of, I mean, I guess it does. I was going to say it doesn't have any direct commentary from me. It's more indirect commentary in that I built this system, and the way I built this system is kind of like a commentary, but it's a very different sort of like thing. And to me, I think, yeah, trying to be able to sort of like, make work that occupies these different spaces, I think is a very kind of like interesting challenge.
What I love about your work is that dichotomy does exist. You have both sides, and I think again of a lot of artists in general, not just crypto artists, just the practice of living a creative life is important, and even more important in the world of AI. I guess I'm wondering, because you mentioned your kids earlier, as a father, the idea of being able to encourage that creativity and being able to express yourself. How do you tell your kids about the work that you even do?
The kids know, so they're 9 and 11, and so they know. And like you said, the sort of like creative practice, they actually do every days as well. We make them do every days. And so my daughter has 6 years of every days that she's done, and my son has 4 years of every days. And so they understand every day. So I'll say that because they do a picture every day. I think they, some of the work they see, some of them, it's like, nah, maybe not, maybe not quite ready for that. In general, you kind of mentioned AI, and I think there's this sort of idea that this is, the end of creativity for people. And I just see it as completely the opposite of that. I see it as a tool for unlocking an insane amount of creativity, and it will allow people who just don't have the technical ability to sort of like make what's in their head. Now they can do that. And I really look at it, the camera, as an analogy to it. Like we all have cameras now, but we're not all like photographers. Like almost everybody takes some level of pictures, I would say, you know, but almost nobody I know is a photographer. And so I think that's what this tool will sort of like, unlock. Everybody will use AI to make art or to make things, to make images. but still only some people will consider themselves sort of like artists, and society at large will only sort of like look at some people as sort of like artists with this stuff. And so, and I think it also like has raised the bar for sort of like creativity, because I look at things now that if you had showed me that like 5 years ago, it would be like, oh my God, this is like insane. Like, look at this thing. And now I look at it and it's like, it's fine. It's like, whatever. It's like, I'm not even going to share this with anybody. It's like, whatever. It's cool, I guess, kind of. And it's like, and so it's like to cut above the noise and make something super true and sort of like novel. I think, you know, the bar keeps going up too. And it's sort of like, you see things now and it's like, well, it's not that good. It's not, like before it was like just getting the fingers right or whatever. And now it's like, well, it's acting and this is not that good. And it's like, now it's like, okay, well, now it needs to, pretty soon it's like, okay, well, this isn't Citizen Kane. What? And it's kind of like, before it was like, oh, it could string together three sentences. It's like, well, now it's not Shakespeare. It's like, okay, well, Shakespeare is the fucking bar now. It's like, Jesus Christ. It seems like the bar is going up, not down.
I hear that, and I agree with you in many ways. I also think that there is something about the magic of people who are really good at their craft that at one point not only was a barrier, but it was something that allowed us to see people in a different plane. And when I used to teach, I taught a whole class on the movie Minority Report, and not through the lens of it being a good movie or bad movie. I just said, in 1999, Spielberg gets the 15 smartest people he's ever known or had even existed, and he said, what are the technologies going to be 50 years from now? And they give him all these predictions, and Nicholas Negroponte from MIT and the guys from the Whole Earth catalog, like just big thinkers. And within about 12 years, almost all of those had been realities, and a lot of it, HP says, we watched Minority Report, we rethought our desktop based on it. And there's a line in the movie where one of the characters says, science has stolen most of our miracles. And that line resonates with me a lot, because I do think that there was a moment when you could do your work and someone could say, I don't know how to do that. And that's part of what makes you. And now someone could go to Midjourney and say in the style of Beeple, and they get something that's a facsimile of. But I guess think about the craft, because you mentioned that, the toolkit is changing dramatically. But is there something around not everyone should be an artist that we should respect, or is that just an outdated concept?
I think that's a great question. And I think we are not familiar enough with AI yet to understand good craft and bad craft within it. Because like this artwork, like Diffuse Control, this is an artwork that utilizes AI. I personally, I'm maybe a little impartial, but I think in terms of craft, there is a lot more craft with this artwork that utilizes AI than somebody just going and typing some 3 sentences into Midjourney. If I see some 3 sentences into Midjourney, are you like super impressed when you see that? Just like when somebody shows me their picture that they took of some bullshit out their window or whatever, their food or whatever, I'm not like, oh my God, wow, look at that photo. Like, wow, you are such an amazing photographer. It's like, you took a photo. Okay. And just like, again, you generated some crap on Midjourney. Okay. Like, it's not automatically interesting. In fact, it's almost definitely not interesting. And so, and if somebody generates something on Midjourney and they're like, I'm an artist, it's like, okay, cool. Just because you say that, just like if somebody shows me their crappy photos that they took and it's like, they just take some photos once in a while and they're like, I'm a photographer. It's like, okay. If you say so. But like, I hate to say it, the world doesn't look at them as a photographer. Like, they don't value their work. And so again, I think it's like, it will sort of like balance itself out in terms of like the people who are doing truly novel things with this AI and they have utilized and sort of like mastered these tools to a level of craft that does rise above a 3-second prompt in Midjourney, you'll be like, huh, okay, that is actually a really interesting use of like AI and these sort of like tools. Again, I don't think that, to me, it doesn't negate being able to sit down with a pencil and draw an amazing like thing. Like that will still be valued, and maybe it will be valued even more now that it's sort of like, oh wow, like you like, did that with your hands. That's crazy. Nobody does that anymore. And so just like paintings is still like, if you were able to paint something very well, that is still a valued, sort of like craft, even though we can produce, even before AI, all kinds of crazy images on the computer. And so I think, to me, it's really about, are you doing something new and novel? And doing something new and novel did not become easier with AI because everybody has it. And so it's like, if everybody has the tool, it's like the bar for everybody just changed places. It didn't like suddenly become easier to be an artist. And I think that was also kind of like a misconception with like NFTs, that it was sort of like, well, now it's like easier to become an artist. And it's like, no, it's not easier to become an artist because everybody has access to these tools. And so now you are competing against even more people who can utilize these tools and utilize sort of like distribution to express their ideas. And so if everybody has access to like a new sort of like technology, it doesn't like make it easier for any one person to sort of like do something because everybody has access to that. And so the playing field just changed. It didn't become skewed towards like, it didn't become easier for anybody. It's just a different type of field.
Just to pull on that thread a little bit, because you mentioned earlier about financialization, but also how easy it was at one point for the NFT side for anyone to kind of put something on and try to sell it.
Sure. That was a brief window, though.
Yes, very, very brief window. But I do think, and it's a question I talk a lot about with different artists we meet, which is this idea of, without the financialization, would you still be creating art? And my guess is you would, and as would a lot of, folks in our space. But do you think that there is a demon in the financialization, especially around crypto, because of the casino we're in, that makes it desirable to say, I'm just going to find if I can make money anywhere I can?
To your first point, for sure I would be making without it because I did that for like 20 years. Like I was making the everydays. Nobody was buying them. Like I was not trying to sell them. I had made dozens upon dozens of short films, never having any of them collected. And to be honest, I didn't see this kind of like coming. It wasn't like, oh, well, one day I'll be able to sell my everydays. It was like, I don't see how that could be. Like, it was just like, I make money doing freelance, and like this is the thing that I love doing, and so I'm going to continue doing it because I just have this innate urge to create things. And I think there's many people like that as well. I think the financialization of it, and even to sort of like go back, I feel very lucky that I was able to create for the first 20 years of my career without that. With there being a sort of separation of church and state in terms of like, I make work as Beeple and I do whatever I want and I make whatever I want because there's no collectors. I can say anything. I don't need to worry about like, does somebody want to buy this? And then I just make money doing freelance work. And now that's obviously sort of like not the case. And so I think it's something where you can certainly make work with money in mind, but I believe that's very people, again, if you start with like, I'm trying to make money and then work backwards from there to the art, I believe that's nearly impossible to like, make something that truly kind of like resonates with people, especially over a long period of time, because people are not stupid. And like, if you're not doing something that people emotionally connect with and that builds, or intellectually connect with over a longer period of time, it just won't like, it won't stand up. And like, I hate to say it, but that's what happened with many of these NFT projects is like they acted like, oh, I love this thing, but they didn't actually love it. It was just the money aspect of it. And it wasn't new and interesting. And that's why I think you see, projects like CryptoPunks, standing the test of time, because that was new and interesting. That was truly a new, novel idea that got copied, ad nauseum. And there was interesting ways that people sort of like spun off from that idea. And there was many completely derivative ways that people spun off from that idea. And the derivative ones did not stand the test of time. And this isn't even that long of a time. Like, I'm trying to think, how can I make things that will, last, decades. And it's like, this hasn't even been, 3 years, whatever, 4 years. And so, I don't think you can kind of like, you can certainly try, but over a long period of time, you cannot fool people.
Well, and to your craft, the Larva Labs guys made CryptoPunks without the idea of financialization. They were trying to create, and that's all that mattered to them. And to some degree, still all that matters to them.
And that's another thing that people like recognize, and they're like, wow, they purely made this thing. They gave it away for free. Like, that's awesome.
Wish you could access cash without selling your Bitcoin? Ledn makes that possible. The global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending, Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018 and never lost a single satoshi of client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? With custodied loans, collateral is not lent out to generate interest, no credit checks, funds in less than 12 hours, no monthly payments, repay whenever you want with zero penalties. And proof of reserves reports verified by a top accounting firm are published every 6 months. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at ledn.io. That's ledn.io.
All right, Mike, I want to show you some stuff. I want to get your reactions.
I'm scared. Okay.
Don't be too scared. I think this is all in your world. So my first question, do you still hate the Windows 8 logo?
Okay, oh God, we're going back through all tweets. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Here we go. This guy's going to get me canceled. Not really feeling the Windows 8 logo. I guess it starts to think it's too simple. What do you think? I feel like this was like kind of like right sort of like at the edge of everything turning like flat. I don't hate it as much. I'll say that. I don't hate it as much. So this one, I'm not sure it holds up.
All right, so your attitude has maybe changed towards the Windows 8 logo from 2012.
When I look at that now, I'm not like, ugh. I don't like innately hate it as much as it seems like I did then. So I would say that's All
right, Microsoft, you're looking to sponsor Beeple. You now have a fan. I liked this quote from 2018. Some of the things I do are a little exaggerated. I don't necessarily think the world is ending and that technology is going to destroy everything. I'm actually cautiously optimistic for the future, which it sounds like you still maintain that.
Yeah, I would
especially with the doomsayers who say AI is going to kill us all.
Well, that cautiously optimistic. Cautiously is the key word. And like I'm very like I oscillate back and forth, and I feel like not enough people live in that space of like being excited about this technology and inspired by this technology and seeing a lot of interesting use cases and novel things that can come out of it, but also being like, but also robots might kill us. Like, I think that could happen too. And so it's like, and even, besides robots killing us or things like that, I can also see a lot of, I struggle with the disruption that I think this is going to cause and sort of like how much, like how we're going to do that. And I know in the past, we've always, we all used to be farmers and then we moved on and blah, blah, blah. And like, we've always managed to figure out how to come up with new jobs for people. But this is just happening so fast. And it's at such an order of magnitude that I'm like, oh, what are these people going to do though? Like, I don't know, because this just like eliminated, like, I typed the thing in and it just like, it eliminated a lot of work. I don't know. Like,
all right, so this one is a maybe. We'll see how it goes.
This one seems pretty good. Keyword cautiously.
I remember seeing this piece and
This
We'll
guy's
put
really going to the archives. I love it.
I remember loving this piece for years, and
That's amazing.
before I knew you as an NFT artist, but it's just because Vimeo, people would share playlists, and I was thinking about this through the lens of, I believe you created the music as well as the artwork itself. And so one, I wanted to ask you about, when you see this, or any feelings it brings you, is this still Beeple in your mind compared to where you are today? But also, again, to artists create, you're also playing with sound, and you're playing with animation and all of these different things. And, give us a little bit of your reaction to this.
Yeah, so this work, this is called Instrumental Video 10. And so this was a big focus of the work that I did for probably the first 10-ish years, 10, 12 years of sort of like creating artwork. And I would make these videos that were very tightly synced audio and video. And for the first 10 of them, this was the last one, I did all of the audio myself as I was making the video. And so if you listen to this, every single instrument and sound you're hearing in the audio is represented visually in this video. And so this took a very long time to animate by hand all of these, different things, and sort of line them up so that they timed up when you heard the thing, and they were made sense visually in the space. And so it was a very meticulous process that took, let's say, at least a year. And so, yeah, in terms of like, is this Beeple? It's like, yeah, this was Beeple in 2010. Like, yeah, this is what it looked like. It feels
ago. Like you too. I mean,
10, 12 years ago. And so, yeah, I think, and that's where, again, things have changed wildly. And there's like, work that like completely people you would show it to and be like, I have no idea whose artist this is. I mean, many different things like that.
I love this. Again, I think about, the lessons for people, but even as we were touching on the lessons of parents and being able to guide your kids, the ability to walk away, the ability to say, I've put enough in, it may not be perfect, but it is what it is. And it feels like this is really it's the underlying ethos of a lot of your work, it feels like, which is, I'm just going to do this every day, no matter where I'm at.
100%. Yeah, this one definitely stands the test of time. And if anything, I feel like I need to like hear this more, because outside of the everydays, not having deadlines really hampers me. And there's many things that I've got hard drives full of shit that perfection turned out to be the death of progress, and I just never released it. And it's like, son of a bitch, I should have released that. And so I need to hear this, just as much as anybody else. But I think I summed this saying up into a more succinct thing, is in that you don't have a lack of ideas, you have a lack of deadlines. And the more deadlines you have, the more ideas will come out. And I think, that's something that exists on every level. And I've heard Pixar say they don't finish movies, they just run out of time. And like, they set a deadline and like, that's it. And they're working right up to the deadline. And yeah.
I thought there was something interesting here, right? Are there any everydays that you genuinely like? From the Atlantic again, there are a few, but not very many. These are usually the results of me getting lucky and sort of happening into something I like. Again, 2011, do you still feel this way? Or do you feel like now I kind of know everyone I'm putting out and I enjoy them?
No, definitely not that. That's not even remotely true. Like, no, it's still like, it's still not many. It's like most days I'm just like, ugh, this is fucking terrible. What am I doing?
Just press send. It's fine.
Like,
it's good enough.
It's like run out of time, and I see 50 other things, and it's like, this is like, just no. So yeah, I think part of that is just like, these are done in a couple hours each day. I think it's really hard. They're sketches. It's really hard to make something that's like, in my opinion, good in 2 hours. And I don't do it very often. And so, yeah, I would say this one's pretty accurate still.
All right. And then just finally, in our show and tell portion, a bunch of your VJ loops. And what I love about this was the open source mentality of creators, take it, do whatever you want with it, and have fun. But really, as an inspirational element, you can see there's two completely different styles in these, and just all of the work that you just gave out into the world. It really felt to me that you were looking at this primitive of Creative Commons and open sourcing and trying to inspire others to play the game along with you. So what started you on this idea of, let me just give art away?
So it started in that I was always making sort of like clips like that from the very beginning of sort of like making digital art. I was making short little abstract experiments. At one point, I would say in maybe 2008, 2009, I tried VJing myself and sort of like playing these clips live. And I found that was really not very fun to do, but I did have a lot of fun making the clips. And so I was like, well, what if I just made these clips and then gave them away and then anybody could sort of like use them? And also around that time, I was entering a lot of film festivals and getting rejected at a lot of film festivals. And I was paying fees to get rejected at these film festivals. And then I got into a few film festivals and I saw the other work in film festivals and I thought, I don't give any shit if I get accepted to these anymore because I don't respect or like the other work in these festivals. So who cares? But I still want people to see my work. So I was like, if I give away my work, it's almost like, and it shows at clubs, which it now does all over the world, probably every night, wherever, because those clips have become, very popular, that people will see the work and people will experience it. And, it doesn't really matter if I get credited for it because it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I just started giving them away, and then I also realized there was kind of added sort of like, downstream effects of people sort of like, then wanting to hire me for, different concert visuals. And that's how I ended up eventually doing, the Super Bowl and Zed and different things like that. And so, yeah, I think there was a sort of like lot of benefits. And I think it's obviously sort of counterintuitive that giving things away can create value. And many people at that time told me, if you just keep giving away work, nobody's going to ever value your work. And yeah, I don't think.
Look at them now.
I don't think that bore out. And I was, even back then, it was like, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's true. Yeah, because again, we live in sort of like an attention economy. And so when you can provide value for people and provide something that makes their life more entertaining or easier, it will have value, and like, that's it.
Wish you could access cash without selling your Bitcoin? Ledn makes that possible. The global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending, Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018 and never lost a single satoshi of client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? With custodied loans, collateral is not lent out to generate interest, no credit checks, funds in less than 12 hours, no monthly payments, repay whenever you want with zero penalties. And proof of reserves reports verified by a top accounting firm are published every 6 months. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at ledn.io. That's ledn.io.
All right, we're gonna do one last segment here.
Okay.
A little rapid fire. I ran out of questions, so I just went to some folks we know and asked them what question they would want to ask you.
Okay, here we go.
So first is, Snowfro asked me to ask you, do you have any recurring dreams, and do they ever show up in your practice?
I did have for a while one recurring dream. I've not had it in a while, where I would miss my everyday and it was like a nightmare. And it was like, I would remember it like, an hour after midnight or whatever. And it was like, I probably had that dream like, I don't know, 20, 30 times, but I haven't lately. And so, yeah, I don't remember my dreams usually, to be honest. Sorry.
Sam Spratt asked me to ask you, what is it like working with your brother? A lot of family strife happens, and brothers don't often go into business together, but you and Scott have seemed to make it work. And so what was that first moment you both knew you could stop being idea guys and really build an enterprise together?
So as soon as the 2020 sort of like collection sale in December of 2020, a couple months before the sort of like big auction, I was like, oh, dude, you should like quit your job. And he was like, kind of wanting to try something new. He worked at Boeing. And I was like, you should quit your job and we can make sort of like, crazy digital physical art. And so he literally quit his job the next day. And it's been, I can't imagine going through all of this without somebody that I have just rock solid, complete trust in, and none of this shit would have happened without him. Like in terms of the studio and building all these boxes and shit, I wouldn't have done any of that stuff like for sure without him. And so yeah, he's been absolutely amazing and just is such a like understands the space, understands what we're doing, understands like art, and so yeah, he's been amazing to work with.
All right. Seneca wanted me to ask you, do you prefer hard or soft cheese?
That's a good question. I definitely would say hard cheese. And
Is that a Wisconsin thing? I mean, what's going on here?
It is from Wisconsin, so I do like a good cheese.
All right. Benny Redbeard asked me how you go about your day being both Mike Winkelmann and Beeple. And I think we answered that, but just to give Benny his one-line answer, what do you say?
I mean, it is what it is. I'm only one person. It's not like it's like I'm Mike Winkelmann. It's like, oh, and now I'm Beeple. Okay, let's put my Beeple hat on
for the cable TV
now,
show.
Everybody.
All right. Final question comes from Bobby Hundreds, who said, and I think we've touched on this, but I think he has a really interesting point here, which is, as he thinks about your thoughts on Gen AI, he said, your art was so tremendous because you were turning out a piece a day. And he's like, to the layman, that may not be as impressive anymore because of AI art.
100%.
So do these AI models diminish the value and weight of what you do?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I think the idea of making a work a day, again, I totally agree. Like people were like, wow, you make a whole picture like every day. And now it's like, well, you could do that in 2 seconds. And sometimes it feels like I'm, doing things like the old hard way in a way that, in terms of the like workflow that I know I'm going to spend 2 hours making an image that I could spend 2 seconds making sometimes. And sometimes it would come out better with AI. It's like getting so good. To me, I think the challenge is trying to figure out and stay one step ahead of what AI can do. And I think to me, it's still about the intention and the message and the why did you make it and what does it say versus just making any sort of like image. And I think, again, I go back to sort of like photography. I can click a thing in 2 seconds and make a photo. It's like, but again, nobody gives a shit. Like, and so what is that saying? Why is that interesting? You still have to sort of like come up with that regardless of how fast the tools can create images.
All right, Mike. Well, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you for spending it with us and with me.
Thank you. This is great. This was great questions. Like this guy really went deep in the archives. I very much appreciate it. So
we appreciate it as well, and we can't wait to see what's next.
Awesome. Thank you.